Yo, what up, guys? What up? What up, man? I know it's been a while since I have had my live stream. I'm glad it's back, guys. I'm excited for it, right? Bringing it back. So it's been probably like 4 or 5 months, man. It's been a few months, to be honest with you. I'm not sure when. I'm trying to think when was the last live stream that I had here on my channel. I know it's been a bit. But again, I'm excited, man. I'm glad I have it back. I'm going to be bringing it back consistently, right? So going forward, it is going to be back. So my schedule for streaming here on YouTube is going to be every Thursday night at 9 p.m. Central, which is what it is now, 9 p.m. Central. And I am going to also be streaming on Twitch and Kick. More gaming, talking tech stuff as well, things of that nature, man. And I stream on those channels, on those platforms, Friday nights and Sunday nights as well. And then I'm trying to squeeze in another day, Tuesday or so. So that's kind of the schedule right now, man. Here on my YouTube channel, where we talk tech, programming, all of that stuff, guys, is going to be every once a week, Thursday nights. I'll be streaming. Right. So again, man, I'm excited. Glad to have this back. So I've been working. There's a lot of things that been happening. Oh, damn it, guys! Hold up, hold up. Let me stop stream. All right, guys. Now I'm back. Man, I had a broadcast already created, so whenever I streamed, I was streaming a new broadcast, not the one that I already had created. So I had to kill it. Hopefully, nobody joined the first stream. Hopefully, people joining this new broadcast that I have. Again, trying to keep things organized, right? Instead of trying to keep things a bit more organized, and by that, I did have a broadcast set up in OBS Studio. It just whenever I came to stream, I end up streaming the wrong one. Um, but yes, now I see that it is working and we're fine on that. Damn it, man, that was my mistake. So either way, man, got that straightened out. Again, it's been a while, man, but I'm glad, guys. How I mentioned, I'm glad to be back, bringing streaming back. Those of y'all who have joined my stream in the past, we talk tech, we're going to talk programming, different stuff, cloud, database, different things, guys. And I'm just trying to organize things a little bit better. It is going to be back consistently. So again, every Thursday nights, 9 p.m. Central, I'll be streaming, guys. Every Thursday nights, 9 p.m. Central. I do stream on Twitch and Kick, and that's where I do my game kind of streaming. So you want to join me there, man? Give me a follow on Twitch. I am the real Lou. Same thing on Kick. I am the real Lou. I stream again Friday nights, Sunday nights on those platforms. I am going to have a giveaway on my Twitch channel next week on Friday, the 29th. So September 29th, which is Friday. I'm going to be giving away some Elgato products. I'm going to be giving away keyboard, mouse, things of that nature, guys. So again, if you're interested in any of that, man, go give me a follow on Twitch, join stream, and be on. I'll give you some directions on how to enter in some of these giveaways that I'm going to be doing on those platforms. So again, guys, man, I'm glad to be back, and let's get started, guys. So one of the topics that I wanted to talk, pretty much I wanted to talk to y'all about, it's going to be what type of software engineers will never succeed. So I came across this post, and interesting post, right? But ultimately, what it's talking about is what type of software engineers will never succeed, right? And it's interesting, right? So I want to read through some of these, right? One of the things that they kind of label, observe from the real world in the IT industry, there's are people who believe that optimization is needed when when we get a production issue. Who believe that if you don't get a promotion just with jobs, who don't even care about code practices and still believe in defining variable that I, J, K, blah, blah, blah. But one of the things that this optimization, right? And this is kind of one of the things that I kind of seen, and I kind of even talking to other software developers, even not just software developers, but that work for a company, but even people that are starting their own platform, right? They're creating their own platform. They're doing everything themselves. That are more senior type programmers. Some patterns that I see that distinguish, let's say, somebody who's a more senior software developer compared to, say, a junior, somebody who's trying to become a software engineer, right? Software developer, is they view things in the form of simplicity. They view things as even something that could be refined and optimized. There's no need to do that in a lot of the cases because it's fast enough as it is. So why optimize something that doesn't require, right? Like there's no need to put effort into something that A works, B works well from a performance standpoint, right? When I say well, it works well enough where there is no negative effect to the end user or there is no negative effect from the back end from a server standpoint. So if that's the case, I like to think of it as, and I think this is where a lot of the battles come in. I feel like when it comes to programming languages, man, you got some engineers that are like, C++ all the way. Python sucks because it's slow compared to C++ and so on. Okay, and that's true, right? Here's the thing, it's true. I'm not denying that. I think what happens though that we don't when you look at things from a business standpoint, right? And this is where I think, especially senior engineers, and by senior I mean that really understand the business of it as well, aspect of it. You want to build, most of the time, you want to build something fast. You want to get it out there to market. You want to deploy it out for the users to use and be able to get feedback, right? And obviously fine tune it and so forth. That's kind of what you should want and what I think most people should be striving for. What you don't want to do is build something and then, try to optimize every aspect of it for the purpose of you only have 10 users a day coming to your using your platform, even 100 users a day or whatever. It's like, okay, all of that optimization, you're using, in your mind, maybe Rust for the back end, from the APIs, or even, some kind of more, maybe go old school C++, because you really want all of that to be working at the fastest speed possible. But it's like, is it needed? It's in most cases, 98% of the time, dude, it's not needed. Which is why even something like Python, as an example, which it's slow when you compare to C++. But let's just kind of put in, a lot of these languages kind of in the same bucket, right? So Python, Ruby on Rails, PHP, JavaScript, they kind of fall in the same bucket. Obviously, performances vary, but they're somewhat similar. Some languages may be a little bit more faster when it comes to, web development, as an example. But nevertheless, they all have pros and cons, but they're somewhat similar, I will say, right? Like compared to like the language that I just mentioned, if you were to compare them to, let's say, C++, C, Rust, these other languages, C Sharp even, Java, they don't really compare when it comes to performance, right? These other languages like C, C++, C Sharp, Java, Rust, their performance are way more faster than JavaScript, Python, Ruby on Rails, PHP, as an example, like these other languages. But right, here's the but. When we look at how some of these languages are being used, like Ruby's on Rails, PHP, even Python, right? JavaScript. They're being used for web development. There's a handful of apps for each language that I just mentioned that exist today. I totally understand that, there's some that may be used more than others, but at the end of the day, every language that I mentioned, there is hundreds, if not thousands, of applications out there. Out of all the millions of applications that exist, there's hundreds, if not thousands, that web application that exists that you can't tell, you wouldn't even be able to tell the difference. If you have a web app that's using C Sharp, you have another web app that's using Ruby or Rails. I'm almost guarantee you, as an end user, if you were to go and use, if let's say they were running the same application, right, the same UI, the end user would not even be able to tell. And the reason why is that even though the C Sharp, as an example, is faster than, let's say, Ruby on Rails or Python, etc., the bottleneck a lot of the times, there's other constraints that could slow down the performance. Maybe it's bad internet connection, right? If you got a bad internet connection, that could slow down. Maybe it's bad database design, right? You have a table that's been growing and growing, and it hasn't been indexed properly, or it hasn't been indexed at all. So as it does its queries and pull data to feed the UI, it's running slow. It takes seconds. Instead of taking microseconds, it takes seconds to run the query. So that would mean that from the end user, it's going to take seconds before they even see any data on the front end, right? There's a lot of aspects that could entail. Maybe your application is deployed in your home local server that you have, and that's where it's being managed, and your internet sucks at home, or your server, just you're using very bare minimum resource or whatever, right? Again, there's a lot of different constraints. But if you were to set up an environment where you have a Python web application, C Sharp web application with the same hardware, right? Let's say even the same cloud provider, let's say put them AWS, in the same region, same hardware, all of that, the same, and deploy the same front end to it. From an end user, the chances of the end user saying or feeling that, hey, it runs faster in C Sharp, I'm almost positive, I can tell you right now, it is not. They're not going to be able to tell the difference, in most cases, right? And again, this is where I think people get too, they over-engineer. Like, they're going to come up with an application. So now they're trying to think, I want to use the fastest the language that I can on the back end, right? Maybe you're going to use Rust for APIs or whatever. And again, maybe they're doing some data processing, but the data that they're processing, it's literally like a couple hundred rows. But they want to use something very robust, something that's going to be quick and fast, C++ or Rust, when they could obviously use something even like Python, which again is very good for data. And a couple hundred rows, I can tell you right now, it is nothing for Python to handle. Like, that's peanuts. So it's like, if you were to compare the two, on top of that, something like that, and you were doing it in Python, you could, without a doubt, do it quickly, like very, very quickly. So, again, over optimization, I think, is key, man. In order to become, in my mind, if you're trying to become a good software engineer and you're trying to have success in your career, I could tell you, at least through my experience in ways, and because I have worked for companies in the past that were not tech companies, but they have a tech need, right? Like, I worked for a healthcare company in the past, but there's a tech need that they needed from the purpose of processing data. Right, we're dealing with XML, the EDI file, there's database development, there was, we had to process our data, a lot of pipelines. Again, the list goes on, even some programmatic stuff, building a UI. In this case, we also built some automation of reporting. We built some processes to deploy, to take this, the data set that we had, and it was slicing it up to like couple hundred different files for like every territory that exists, and then it deployed all these files to SharePoint site, but in their respective folders by year and months. So there's logic involved as well to know where it doesn't just go in a generic folder, but it needs to be in the right year and the right months. And if the year and the months doesn't exist, we got to create those folders and then save it in there. Again, I'm just giving you some examples where we use a lot of tech to automate and process data, and again database development, design, and all that stuff in a tech company, right? And at the end of the day, what the business cares is they want to get things done fast. They don't care what language you use. A lot of from and this is where I kind of have understood throughout the years, right? Because I have a business mindset. Is there's processes sometimes that you can say, hey, we're going to optimize it, and maybe instead of taking 2 minutes to process this data, we could optimize it where it takes us 1 minute, right? That's 50% performance enhancement when you look at it, right? We slice it in half from a performance, but again, it went from 2 minutes to 1 minute, and on top of that, this is a process that maybe runs once a week. So it's like, is it worth putting that much energy and effort to save 1 minute? No, compared to we had this other process that literally ran sometimes multiple times a day that we had to run, like during reporting periods. We had to run it multiple times a day sometimes. And that process literally took hours to run. Like, I'm not saying hours, I'm talking about like 8-12 hours to run. And that's where we optimize that and reduce it down to, let's say, 30 minutes. And then that became way more beneficial, like to spend effort in that. So again, you got to pick your battle, the what to optimize, and I think that's how, as you start learning, and instead of trying to optimize everything, see what impacts business, see what makes sense to optimize. That's where you get your better bang for your buck. That is where you become more valuable to the organization, which means you're going to have more longevity. You're going to have more success as a software engineer, in my opinion, right? So y'all let me know what y'all think, but that's my feedback on that aspect of it anyways. Let's see. All right. My bad, guys. Hold up. All right, cool. Um, and again, I think there's different aspects that people could look at to, from how can you have success in your career, but for me, those are some key aspects, man. When you go into a company, find what the business needs. Don't find what you think is ideal to optimize, because maybe what you're trying to find that's ideal to optimize is not even a burden to nobody. So really, you know, you're satisfying yourself, but you're not the business right now. You're not the customer. So because of that, they're nobody going to appreciate that effort or that work. So find what is it that's a burden to the business. I remember again in my the example I gave you when I started a specific role some years back in a healthcare company. One of the issues that they had was this one process that took hours to run, dude. I'm telling you, it like literally took like 8 hours to run, and if there was something wrong, it became more. And by wrong, I mean there was sometimes, it's almost, it wasn't the way they were working was not ideal, but it was like, all right, run the report. Let's look at the data at the end, and then as you see the data, then they'll be able to tell like, hey, this is right, this is wrong. And then something was wrong, then they're like, oh, we got to rerun the process. And that process took like 8 hours to run. So ultimately, one of my tasks when I first started was, hey, we're going to redesign this. And I pretty much designed it from scratch. And we were able to get it down to like, let's say 30 minutes or something, right? So hours to minutes. That became a big game changer, man, when we did that. Because, but again, that was one of those those cases where there's probably other stuff I could have came in and optimized, but that's not where the burden was at. The burden was with this specific process, and then as I optimized it and it became beneficial, I became more valuable to the business at that point forward. And then obviously, started building and getting more trust, and I just became an asset, right, to the organization. Until eventually I ended up leaving. So I didn't quit. Obviously, if I would have stayed, who knows? Probably would have been there longer. But again, that's here and there. I ended up leaving. And I ended up starting my own opportunities, right? That's kind of when I started my own business, and now I kind of do a lot of work for clients, build web applications, do a lot of data processing, manage clients' data, do a lot of integration projects, things of that nature. Um, but again, I think that's one of the key things, man. You want to have a successful career as a software engineer. Um, Find what are the burdens for the business, and then those are the areas that you could improve, right? You could optimize, you could fine tune, you could enhance, and that's what's gonna make you very beneficial. If you work for a company that's a tech company, right? Let's say like a Google, or where everybody's pretty much for the most have its core is tech. I think that's a little bit different. That's where I think a lot of things that come in handy will be, again, optimization, but on the things that matter, not just things that don't matter. Um, but probably other aspects of it, right? Good relationships with people, man. Don't be an ass to people. Good code, documentation, things that a lot of people suck at, man. A lot of people are not good at documentation. A lot of people are not good at that kind of stuff. So when you're able to do that kind of stuff for your let's say your manager, and they see that you're documenting things well, your code is clean, things of that nature. Doesn't have to be the best code, but you got clean code. It works well, designed properly. You're not over engineering things, right? You're keeping things simple. You're documenting things. That becomes a very big plus, I think, when you actually work for a true tech company. But if you work for a non-tech company, but you're doing tech activities, right? Kind of like I worked for a healthcare company in the past, but I was doing a lot of tech stuff like database design and modeling and enhancing the database processes, creating pipelines, dealing with data. So there's a lot of Python, scripts that I create when it came to ETL processing and things of that nature. What else? I end up building a automation, how I mentioned, right? Automating certain reports, automation, the slicing and dicing of some Excel files, and publishing these to the SharePoint site by year and months in a specific folder, all that kind of stuff. That's where my tech ability came in, and I became valuable. That brought a lot of value to the business, from that aspect of it. So, yeah, man. So that's something just wanted to kind of share. Another topic that I wanted to kind of share with y'all is this. So ultimately, this post where they're talking about is, as a software engineering manager, when a developer says, "I worked late nights and weekends to finish this task," does this make a positive or a negative impression on you? So here's the thing that I would say, man. I think for some managers may be impressed, right? Now, and I'm gonna say the ones that may be impressed are the ones that are not tech savvy type managers, right? Again, going back, maybe you work in you work for a department, small department for a non-tech company like a real estate company, a healthcare company, logistics company, etc. And you're bringing value through tech. What I have seen, some companies value it, some companies don't. But kind of going back to this question, I feel if your manager is a tech type software developer as well, kind of mindset, tech, a lot of the times, if they're managing priorities properly, they're gonna have a feel of how long this should take, because even with myself, right, I have a small team. So when we work on projects, we meet once a week and we kind of review what is there to work on, what projects. Sometimes we're jumping from one project to another. It depends. And then I kind of allocate certain tasks. Like, all right, you're gonna work on this, this, and this, and what I'm asking them to do, I could do myself, and I have an estimate of myself of how long I think it would take if I were to do it. Now, keep in mind, I'm a little bit more senior, so there are certain things that I could do very quickly compared to maybe somebody who's not as senior on my team. Nevertheless, though, I have an estimate of how long I feel I could do it, and then normally I add on to that because I know they're not going to get it done as fast, so I don't try to hold them to that standard, so I add on a little bit more time. But I have a feel how long it take. For some reason, if it takes way more than that, right, where now they have to work weekends and they're pulling the all-nighter, and it could be more so because they're still learning on the job. They don't know how to do it. So now they're just trying to figure it out, right? Trying to test, and it's just taking them hours and hours of what I would call on-the-job learning, right? So from me, my perspective, I look at that is I appreciate the effort. I appreciate that they're putting the effort to learn, and I just reaching out to me and being like, hey, I don't know how to do it. Can you do it or can you help me out? Like they're trying to put that effort, and they're trying to figure it out. And let's say they do figure it out, but it takes them way more longer, right, than I would do. Maybe it takes me 10 hours to do, but it's taking them 60 hours. I don't know. I'm just as an example, right? But at least they're putting the effort. They're trying. They're doing all the right things. So I see that to some extent as a positive. But I would say if that occurs over and over again, I don't see it as too much as a positive. That tells me that their abilities to do things in a timely manner, it's not there. And maybe because lack of knowledge. And again, when you're new to coding, again, you're going to have days that happens. But as long as you're not being overloaded in work and you're being assigned reasonable work to do, it should not be an ongoing process, right? That should not be occurring over and over again, where you have to work weekends and you're staying up late nights, where, in my opinion, that becomes more negative than positive over time. First time you do it, if that's the case, like, all right, nothing wrong with that. But over time, and then again, I mean work that should be done in a normal 40-hour work week, right? I'm not talking about, hey, we got a normal 40-hour work week, but we're doing some deployment. We're doing something special that we got to do over the weekend. That's not what I mean. But what I'm talking about is if you have work assigned to you and, it should be done within the 30, 40-hour time period at most, but it takes you 60 hours to do or even longer, which now requires you to work weekends, requires you to pull an all-nighter to get it done because it needs to be done at a specific period. Maybe the first time, it's like, okay, manager may not see it as nothing bad, but they may, some of the positive that come out of it is like, hey, at least they're making sure that it got done. So they did what needed to be done, stay late, put in the hours, and so forth. But I will tell you right now, if you do that over and over again, and that pattern existing too much, A, it's not good for you for one, but B, it doesn't make you look good, man. So that's something that I feel it really doesn't make you look good over time, right? So if you happen to be one of those engineers where software engineers that you're being assigned work, and it's work that in theory should be done in a 40-hour work week, but it's taking you way much longer because you're just not picking things up. So you got to do extra research, extra testing, and this and that, and to eventually you figure things out. That's not good. So I wouldn't be bragging to your manager, oh, I pulled an all-nighter again. I worked all weekend again. I know sometimes that may seem like makes you seem good that you're going above and beyond. But again, if the manager that knows what you're doing, and they know that, hey, what the work they gave you in reality should have been done in a specific time period, does not make you look good, man. So that's just one of the things to keep in mind. Um, oops. See what's happening over here. All right, my bad, guys. So, okay, there it goes. I was trying to find something, but I see it now. Um, all right, guys. So we're gonna be switching. So one thing that I wanted to talk to y'all that about is, I know with AI, kind of blowing up in the last year and a half or so, right? There've been a lot of things about no code projects, a lot of automation that's happening right with AI to generate code. And I think anybody that has experience, done some testing, right? ChatGPT, and there's other obviously plugins that are doing more than just that. One of the things though that anybody who have done enough testing on it would know that the code that it generates right now, I have not seen any code where it generates a whole project for you. That's good. That's good. Now, the way I see the whole utilizing the AI is more in a modular sense, right? More like specific, like in your whole application, there's a lot that goes on, right? And I'm talking about from the, not just from the development, but from the deployment, and the list goes on and on. But from a from the way to utilize it, obviously, and this is the way I think is going to be implemented, like it is being implemented today, and it's going to be expanded on as time goes on. Is back, you always hear, right, from a software developer, Google your friend, right? Stack Overflow. You go there, you get some, you're stuck, and all the time when you're stuck, it's very more singular. Maybe you have a project and you're trying to, you know, upload a file using the Flask framework, right? Like the backend Flask framework of Python, and you're trying to upload a file to the UI, right? It's very more specific. It's not like the whole project, but it's like that specific piece is a piece that you're kind of seeking insight. Like, hey, how do I upload a file? And have the backend Flask as an example to take that file and then save it, right? Maybe save it locally in the back server, or send it over to an SFTP site or whatever. So it's more very specific, and very just that specific functionality that you're trying to figure out how to do. I think when it comes to stuff like that, no different than the way one would have used Stack Overflow and Google in the past. That's how AI could get utilized, whether it be ChatGPT or whether it be other plugins, right, that are out there, add-ons, that's connected to it. That's how I feel like it can be utilized. I even use it as well when I work on stuff. And I can tell you right now, there's a lot of code that I receive back. It doesn't work. Put it that way. It's missing a lot of pieces, right? Sometimes a good example would be, I have done, played around with like ChatGPT to generate some Python code for connecting to SharePoint. Let me rephrase it: uploading a file to SharePoint. And I not because I don't know how to do it. I did it more because I'm trying to test the results that I get back. And by me doing that and looking at the code, there's no section on the code that even shows the authentication piece. So again, somebody who knows, who has worked with SharePoint, projects to upload files to SharePoint, I'll tell you right now, you have to authenticate first before you can upload anything to SharePoint. Like that's one of the key components. You got to authenticate first. As you authenticate, then you could do some kind of action, right? Download a file, upload a file. And then obviously ChatGPT gave me code, and it was missing that piece. Like, that piece is important, man. Like you cannot connect, you cannot upload anything unless you authenticate. And those are certain pieces that I'm telling you about how it still does not have not figured those things out yet. Um, and that's why you got to be very cautious. And that's one of the reasons why I feel like it's a tool that could get used, it's a tool that can help out, but it is not there, man. Even today, right? It's not there. And I don't know that it's gonna really be there in the next year or two either. And even if it does get there, let's say in 5 years from now, where it's kind of more trusted, more reliable, there's so many scenarios when it comes to code of doing different things, right? Like I'm just mentioning certain things right now, but I have worked throughout my career. So let me put it this way: I think where AI is going to excel is going to be for your very repetitive stuff that's very straightforward. Maybe it could be forms, right? Create a form UI, and then you list the fields. So it generates, the UI, the HTML, CSS of that, and it has those forms. And then obviously, if you're connecting it to some kind of backend, let's just say Django for now or whatever, um, it could generate some code where it's to be able to consume that form information. Like I could see basic stuff doing that, because there's projects that even I work on today that I may build a web application, then I build another web application for another client, but there's certain pieces of the code that's identical, right? It's a scaffolding code, right? I mean, pretty much just using it over again, over again, over again. And there are certain patterns as well, like certain basic functionality, like again, like a form, creating a form, right? Where it could be like, all right, I'm gonna create a form, just name it what you want, and you could, I think AI will figure out how to build it, and even connect it to the back end, and things will be could be develop a lot quicker. Um, but I don't think it's gonna get to the level anytime soon where AI is gonna build complicated applications. That is doing all kinds of other stuff, right? You know, um, maybe an application where it's consuming a file, and then that file is doing some slicing and dicing on that file or whatever. Like it's consuming, Panda's consuming the file, it's doing running some um, some modeling on that file, and then it's maybe it's splitting up the file, or sending it to a web server or whatever, like just doing different other processes, right? That's more complicated, what I'm trying to say. I just don't think it's going to get to that point yet. And because of that, kind of going back to my question, should you learn Python programming, but Python specifically? I still think the answer is yes. If you're interested in programming and you want to learn how to program, and I know there's big layoffs that happened, right? Like about a year ago, where tech companies were laying off like crazy and so on. I do feel, man, even with all of that has happened, even people that don't get laid off, I've seen firsthand, man, where people are like, they get burned out. You know what? I don't want to be a coder no more. I don't want to be a software developer no more. So they find something else. I've seen firsthand where people, they make good money, so they save it, right? Maybe they're making 200,000 a year. So they're like, you know what? I'm still living rich. I want to live poor for a couple of years. I want to make all this money, invest it, save it, and then like that, leave 6-7 years later. I'm gonna have over $1 million in the bank, maybe even more, 2 million, depends on how their money works, have it invested, and then they quit, then they're out. And because of that, there's always bodies leaving tech, always bodies leaving a software developer role. Um, Anybody who's new, right? Again, my recommendation, if you're new to programming and you're learning and you're growing in that area, I get it. Working at big tech, your Google, your Facebook, these big companies, that's kind of what you hear all the time. And, they pay very good monies and all that stuff. there's many tech opportunities that are not in big tech. That maybe it's for a real estate company, a logistics company, a healthcare company. A lot of these companies that I mentioned to you, I have actually worked for. I worked for a logistics company for X amount of years. I worked for um, a healthcare company for X amount of years. And I could tell you right now that both of these companies required some sort of technical abilities, right? For the purpose of automation, for the purpose of maybe developing some sort of web platform, for the purpose of managing data right in house, creating database modeling and storing data and things of that nature. They all require some sort of tech, and so there's opportunity there. Now, I will tell you right now, they're not going to pay as much as you would going to Google and Apple and Facebook, but dude, you can make really good money still. Especially if you're brand new, you're trying to get your foot in the door. Maybe Google won't even give you a chance because of your self-taught and so on. But you know what? You go to a logistics company, they may give you a chance, depending on where you're at. But probably pay you 80,000 a year or something like that, maybe more. Again, depending on where you're at. But nevertheless, then you could get more as you go on. I know people that were software developers that work for like a logistics company, and they were making 110,000, 120,000, what's in that range. So again, still good, and this is in Texas, so keep in mind, not California, Texas. So still not bad, right? Reasonable money. So there's opportunities, man, and even though a lot of the AI stuff that does get implemented, that's really starts to take off, would be probably more like in tech companies, or would be more with certain companies, maybe like finance that utilize it to kind of reduce their IT staffing and things of that nature. I would tell you right now, there's a lot of companies out there, man, that are not big time companies, like they're not $1 billion companies, but maybe they bring in revenue of like 200 million a year, 300 million a year, 100 million a year, like that kind of revenue, 50 million a year, even things of that nature. These are like what do they consider small to micro cap type companies. They need employees, with technical abilities as well. And these companies, a lot of them, I can tell you right now, they're not going to be implementing AI anytime soon. They're not doing none of that stuff. Like there's a lot of them are even old school, very behind the times. They're still in the technology of the 2000s, or what's in that range. So again, there's because of that, there still is opportunity. You should learn how to code if you want to learn how to code. In this case, Python specifically, it's very good because it's very diverse, right? You could build web applications. You could, very, data wise, ETL pipelines, things of that nature. Very good for that stuff as well. Statistics, obviously, it's very known, good for that. So you could use the way I use Python, just so y'all know. I have a lot of web services that I create. I use it for APIs. I use it for web development, right? Like Django for my backend, things of that nature. And then also, I use it to process data as well. So that's kind of how. And then I use it for automation. We have a lot of automation processes that we have we have schedule and run on, maybe every hour, every 30 minutes, or whatever it is. And a lot of them we're running some kind of Python script to automate certain processes. To maybe it's doing a download this file from an S3 bucket and process it and do X, Y, and Z or whatever, right? And so there's a lot of stuff involved. So I mean, Python very diverse, and that's why I'm a fan of it. Nothing against other languages, because I deal with other languages, but I look at Python as that's the language you want to learn, because you want to get into Python to programming. Do learn it, pick it, learn it. There's a lot of things you could do with it. It's still beneficial to learn how to program even today, man. Even with all the layouts that happened about a year ago, even with AI becoming more popular and all of that, I still think it's very beneficial to learn programming, to expand your knowledge on it. And even though maybe you don't get a big tech job like at Google, some kind of FANG, company, and you're not making $500,000 a year or whatever, like a lot of these people that talk about how much money they make, that's what they mention. You could get a career still. You could get a job working for a healthcare company that requires, they may have a small IT department, a logistics company. Again, I work for a logistics company. They had a very small IT department. When I say small, it was maybe like 4 or 5 people, but they needed one, and a lot of them got paid six-figure salaries. They weren't getting paid quarter million or nothing like that, but they're making 120,000 a year or whatever. Hey, that's not bad. Still making good money, right? Good money, and this is in Texas, so keep in mind Texas, obviously cheaper than maybe New York or California, or etc. But you can still make good money. Same thing with healthcare. Or for a healthcare company, they had a small IT department, right? Nothing big. A little bit bigger than the logistics company, maybe a couple dozen people or so. But still, they need that, right? So even though it's not like a Google where they have thousands of programmers or, people in that field, there's a lot of companies out there, whether, again, real estate, logistics, the list goes on, retail, whatever. They need an IT presence. They have small IT departments. You could get paid well doing that, man. So because of that, I will say yes. It's still a good time to learn programming. If you want to learn Python programming, I will say you go for it, man. Honestly, I don't think it matters what language you learn, but in this case, Python programming, I don't think you could go wrong with it, man. You cannot go wrong with it. There's a lot you could do with it. I know some people look down on Python, like, oh, that's just for mocking applications. But it's not, though, man. I say it's not because there are today, there are applications out there, whether it be big web applications or many other small ones. But there's a lot of applications out there today that are using Python. They're using Django or Flask, whatever framework on the back end. And they're able to handle thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, even a few million people a day with no issue. I'm gonna say it again, with no issue, right? So, just don't think that whatever platform you're building is gonna, you need the best language, the fastest language, because everybody's gonna come to your platform. And honestly, the reality is, that's not what normally happens, man. It just doesn't. So, just want to put that out there. So one thing, guys, we're gonna now switch, and we're gonna talk a little bit about databasing, right? So let's talk about databasing, guys. One of the things, let me see if I have my program on this computer or not. Let me see. So obviously, anybody who's new, I guess the first question is, well, what the hell is a database, right? And I think most people, even non-technical people, kind of understand it, but anybody who just is not quite sure to hold on, I need to install something real quick. So again, anybody who knew when it comes to databasing, there's a many database engines out there, right? So a lot of the time, I think we get too focused on, MySQL, Postgres, SQL Server, Oracle, and we like to distinguish like they're all individual. So those are individual engines, right? They're different engines, but think of it as like a car. There's many different models out there. You got Ford, you got Tesla, you got Chevy, Toyota, etc. At the end of the day, they all do the same thing. They all drive, right? Now, the engine itself obviously varies. Some are faster, some are slower. You got a V8, a V4, four-cylinder. The list goes on. Some are able to handle more workload, like tow, so and so forth. There are like certain engines that are more ideal, more optimized for this kind of data processing. Redshift as an example, and then you have other for analytical processing. Then you have like other database engines that are more ideal, let's say for transactional, or just different on how it's querying the data. But at the end of the day, right? At the end of the day, just from a high level, you know, you have a standard which is called SQL. So that standard language, that syntax, is about 85, maybe 90% of it is pretty much the same. I'm going to say 85%. It's the same for all different database engines. So it's not like programming where if you program in Python, it's way different in JavaScript. And if you program in PHP, it's way different than Python or JavaScript or whatever. Like the language is way different. Even though they all do the same thing, right? You could create a web application using both languages. You create an API using both languages, but the language is way different. In this case, when we talk about database, think of database as a repository to save data, right? Simple as that. And then on top of that, you have different engines as well when you're dealing with databasing, right? So you have your databases from a high level is where you store your data, right? And then from there, your different engine that you have different ways of accessing the data, and that's where the syntax could change. Performance could be faster from one engine to another engine. Just how we talked about cars, you could have a V6 and a VA. Well, the VA could be fine-tuned and souped up compared to the V6. It's just a basic engine. But if you were to compare them together, VA will, let's say, run circles around the V6. Well, there are certain engines, the way they're designed, they have been optimized as well, and it works better, right? They're faster on processing data and things of that nature, right? Depending on what you're doing. Let me see if I have this database. I'm trying to see if I have this connected, and I may have a sandbox environment. So let me check real quick. I do. Sandbox, close connection. All right, cool. So I'm gonna go share my screen. All right. So I'm connected right now to a SQL Server database, right? So again, the way the syntax SQL is there. That's a standard that's used by majority of database engines. But then there are aspects of SQL that are very customizable for each engine. And just kind of show you something, like for example, I'm going to write in SQL, let's say we're trying to, it's kind of small, I think. Oops, that's not what I wanted. How do I zoom out? Oops, there it goes. There we go. Let me make it bigger. Okay. So let's say, what table do I have here? Let me just do all products ranking, right? I don't know how much data I have here, but let's say we wanted the top 100 records from this database, right? So when I run it, we get 100 records that we get back. But one thing I want to keep in mind, if we were to run this select statement, this select statement that I have here pretty much would work for any database engine, whether it be SQL Server, whether it be Postgres, MySQL, etc. Now, every database engine does have some nuances when it comes to kind of give an example when dealing with SQL Server. In this case, you have a database instance, and so in SQL Server, the way it works is you have the whole database instance, and inside that instance, you could create different databases, right? So like database 1, database 2, database 3, etc. That could be whatever you want to be. A good example would be a good reason to have that case would be um, because you're going to manage data for different customers, and you don't want their data to interfere, to overlap in any way. So you're going to just create a whole different database for them, right? So it's still all under one instance, which means think of it as you have a server, and that server you installed SQL Server, the SQL Server database. So that instance of SQL Server, you can now create mini databases inside that instance, right? Database one, let's say database for customer ABC, and then another database for DEF, right? Two customers. So you create databases. Inside each database, then you start getting to what's called schemas. And in this case, by default, it creates a DBO schema. That is a default schema that SQL Server will create. Then you have this informational schema where if I click on it, I don't think it's going to show anything. Nope, it doesn't, which is fine. But nevertheless, you have a DBO schema that it generates by default. Now you could create more schemas. A good example would be, let's say from a design standpoint, is you want to separate accounting information from operational information. In those cases, you could create a schema for accounting, ACCT, right? So you would just go to my case. I would just do create new schema, and I will call it ACCT, short for accounting. So now that I create that schema, I have that as an option, right? Obviously, there's no tables in here, but now I have this accounting schema that I could create tables for, and the purpose behind this is it's only going to store accounting information, and then maybe I create another schema for, let's just call it ops. This will be for operations. So now I have a schema for operational data and a schema for accounting data. And the benefits of doing that is once you start allocating access, you can now fine tune the access. Be like, all right, we're going to give the accounting department access to the accounting schema of the database only. And we're going to get operations access to operational data, which means they have access to the operational schema only, right? It kind of gives you that flexibility. Compared to, let's say, if we have DBO, and let's just say we created all of our tables in here, our accounting and operational tables inside of the one schema, right? You could do that, but now when it comes to from a security standpoint, you're trying to give, let's say, accounting information to accounting tables only or data only. Well, now it becomes a little bit more iffy to separate. There's things you could do, obviously, on a table per table basis, but you don't want to do that. You don't want to be managing each table type deal. So, again, I think from a best practice, that's why you see this pattern more, right? You create different schemas. Then from there, you create the table that relate to that schema. And then you could also provision access on a schema level instead of on a table by table basis. So that kind of allows for that. So this is, again, for SQL Server. If we were so I work with Postgres and SQL servers. That's kind of why I'm using those two examples the most. Let's say if you're working with Postgres, the concept is the same, where you create a database instance, and then inside that database, you're able to create many other databases as well. And then from there, you could have different schemas. And the default schema for Postgres is public. So again, this is for SQL Server. But let's say if we were doing this same table, same query for Postgres database, then it would be public. That would be the difference, right? SQL Server, Postgres. So the select statement, no different, the same. The from is the same. The providing the table name is the same. The only difference is the schema, right? DBO, public, or something else, right? maybe it's coming from the accounting schema or etc. That's how it would be. Um, let's say we were trying to do top 100 like the way I did. Well, obviously for SQL Server, it would be top 100, but for Postgres, it is not top 100. For Postgres, it would be limit 100, right? Those are the little nuances that I was mentioning where it's slightly different. About 85% of the syntax would most likely is going to be the same, but you are going to have that 15% that it's going to be different on a per database engine. And there are some database engines that they use the same pattern. Like I believe if I haven't used MySQL in a long time, but I want to say MySQL uses limit 100 as well, right? So just some engines will use the same pattern, like syntax, as let's say Postgres, but obviously it's different than SQL Server. And same thing with alias. It wouldn't call this an alias name like as, let's call it P for product. Well, same thing goes for the Postgres database. It would be as P is our alias name, right? Let's say we're doing a where statement here. Oops, what happened here? Oh, damn it. It went to the next screen for some reason. So let's say we were doing let's say we were to do where, right? So it'd be where P, and let's just say ID, right? For now, let's say ranking equals, I don't know, 5, right? Something like that. So if we were to do the same thing for Postgres, it really will be the exact same thing, where P ranking equals 5. Same concept, right? And this is where, I guess my emphasis kind of goes back. 85% of the syntax most likely going to be the same. You're going to have that 10-15% that's going to be slightly different, right? Like the way your top, this is limit. The schema obviously is different, but the fundamental is still the same. And that by that I mean, schema period table name, schema period table name, right? Same concept. So I am going to be making more videos related to database. In my case, I'm going to be focused more on SQL Server and Postgres. Again, the main reason why I'm focusing on those two, that's what I deal with on a daily basis. I use Postgres and SQL Server on a daily basis. We have projects right now. We have applications that we use, and even some, data, our database that manages, for reporting, analytics, things of that nature. We're using these two databases. So we have created many procedures for SQL Server and Postgres, functions, things of that nature, right, that we could share. Obviously, I can't share what I have, but I could, share with you the concepts. That's where we have spent a lot of time designing things and working with and things of that nature, right? So because of that, I am going to be making content related to databasing, some basic fundamentals, how to do certain things, create functions, procedures, things of that nature. Kind of go over again basics on if you're trying to get, limit, your select statements. One big thing that I would notate, some applications do that. When I say application, database management tools like that I'm using to query would do this by default. Some do not. Like this one that I'm using, I can configure it to do it, but I removed it. So I just make it a habit to always put top 100 when I'm exploring data, right? What you don't want to do, let's say you're exploring a data that has 500 million rows. What you don't want to do is say select star. because then it's going to bring all 500 million rows, right? As an example, let's say, especially if you don't even provide a where statement. But even if you provide a where statement, unless you know what you're going to get back, like maybe you're getting back, a couple hundred rows. But if you provide a where statement, you don't know the amount, always specify like top something, right? Or limit something, get a limit data set. When you're exploring, that's what you want to do. Get a limit of 50, 100, something reasonable. Because if you don't, and that table happens to be a massive table, you are going to choke that table. Like literally, if there's processes running that are trying to access data to that table, it's going to get locked up and nobody's going to be able to pull from that table until your query is done. And that query now is going to be feeding all that data to you, right? Again, it's coming from a server somewhere else. That data has to come all to you, and depends on what kind of table you're dealing with. Maybe it only has 2 columns, maybe it has 100 columns, or whatever it is. You're going to be bringing all that data in. You're going to be locking up the table. It's going to potentially cause issues for any processes that are trying to access the table. Anybody else that's trying to query from the table, their query is going to have to wait until your query is done. Like, there's so many issues that will come from it. So strongly recommend, guys, put your top 100 or top, limit 100. Always, dude, always. Or specify it in the application you're working on. I believe on mine there's a setting. I'm not sure where that, but I believe there is a setting. Maybe it's under file. I don't know, man. I don't know where is that. But I have seen a setting where I could like specify a limit. But what I have noticed, a lot of database management tools, they do set a limit of 100. I think it's like the default. I believe SQL Server, when you generate statements with SQL Server, it'll set a limit of 1,000 for you in the code base, like the query that it generates. And it does that to help you out, just in case you forget, you don't lock up the table, right? So, but I am going to be making more videos, guys, related to database stuff, sharing some stuff that we have done, how we had to get creative to get certain things to work, things of that nature, and also just share basic stuff. So for those of you who are new, basic stuff on how to update values in a table, how to update it by ID, how to do bulk updates, or how to do transactional type updates, right? You're updating each record one by one, kind of go through that process. And then also procedures, how to design procedures, functions. Then also make video that shows the comparison, right? The difference of Postgres and SQL Server. Create 2 functions, 2 procedures, views, etc., and how they differ, how they vary from each other. All right, guys, so we're pretty much it's already been about an hour. Again, live streams have been gone for a while, and I totally understand, man. I brought it back. Live streams are back. I'm going to be having live streams going forward every Thursday, 9 p.m. Central. It's going to be anywhere between an hour and an hour and a half. Right? Depends on what's going on, and we have a lot of questions, and obviously it may stay on a little bit longer, but normally it'll be for an hour, hour and a half. So be on the lookout for that. I am trying to organize things a little bit better on the live stream. If there's any topics or anything that you may want me to discuss on the live stream, go ahead and send me an email. Send me email at contact@iamlou.net. You could email me there. Let me know maybe something that you want me to discuss. Maybe you have certain questions about something. Maybe you're, whether you're just trying to get into programming, how do I land clients, maybe something relates to AWS or Python specific, then I could maybe add it to the agenda for that stream, and then I could review, like show how to solve a solution as an example, or whatever it may be. So just go ahead and email me. Be more than happy to. I'm not saying we may not be able to squeeze every single question we get, but we'll try to squeeze them in, right, as we can. So again, guys, man, I'm glad I have the stream back. Every Thursday, 9 p.m. Central, going forward. Appreciate it, man. Again, guys, one thing I mentioned, 10,000, guys, 10,000. I know we're not there yet, but my goal with subscribers is 10,000. Once we hit 10,000, I'm going to be doing a giveaway, so be on the lookout for that. It's going to be an Apple product, so just be on the lookout for that, guys. Again, man, appreciate it. Thanks for joining the stream, guys. Y'all take care. Have a good week, and talk to you.